This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast, where our goal is to help you reclaim good practices for following Jesus. If we haven't met yet, my name is Tony, and I'm your host. With over a decade in the local church, I care deeply and passionately about helping you connect with Jesus in practical ways. And if you missed last week's monologue episode, you missed a doozy. That's right, we are in a series right now, a relationship series. Last week, we talked about disciplines. And today we're going to talk about trust. And guess who's back 2 weeks in a row?
Hello.
The legendary Karen Miltenberger. So much great response for her being on the podcast for the very first time. So thankful for that. Hey, do me a favor right now. If this podcast is helpful for you, would you leave us a rating or review on iTunes? It really does go a long way to help spread the word about what God is doing on this platform. Okay, Karen, let's jump into this week's topic. We're going to talk about trust. Yay. Trust is it's tough for any married couple, especially when you've been married for as long as we have. Forever. And let's start off with the scripture for today, and I think you'll be coming out of 29 of Jeremiah.
Yes, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future.
Yeah, one of the things I love about that particular verse is that it reminds us that we have to trust in the Lord and that Jesus knows a lot more than we do. I mean, that idea that the Lord knows what's going to happen and that we can put hope in that and all of those kind of things. So let's start with trust. When you think about trust in marriage, Karen, what do you think about?
I think about you and that what you are saying or doing, that I believe what you are telling me and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think ultimately trust is this idea of belief and belief that we're doing something special and that we're kind of going with what people say. One of the things that we talk about in our house, we have a little saying around trust. I'm wondering if you could share it and then maybe explain it for all the people.
So the saying that we use is trust is given and mistrust is earned. And it's one of those things that sort of, we're going to give you trust until you give us a reason not to trust you. So until you lie, cheat, steal, kind of those things, then the trust gets broken.
Yeah, I think one of the ways to think about it is like we all have a trust tank. And one of the positions that you and I have decided to take with our kids specifically and with each other, I think that that's a safe statement, is that the trust tank starts at full and it's our activities that cause the tank to lower. Now, one of the other things that I believe about trust is that trust and reliance are partners. And I want to dive into that a little bit because one of the things that's true is that we don't want to rely on someone more than we trust them. And why this is important is that if you're in a marriage right now and you're not sure that you can rely on the other person, another way to think about it is that maybe you don't have a very full trust tank. Do you want to expound upon that anymore when it comes to trust and reliance?
Yeah, so that and the access that we kind of give somebody to, right? That I am going to, I trust you with everything. And so because of that, I'm going to rely on you to do the things you are going to say you're going to do. Right? Is that?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think they kind of go hand in glove, right? Like trust and reliance in partners, trust and access are partners, right? Reliance over time is how we give people more and more access, especially early on. Now, you and I are 20 years into this, and we're fairly reliant on everything that we do. Although there are some things that you may not rely on me to do the way that, because I've proven untrustworthy in those areas.
100%.
And vice versa, right? Like,
sure.
yeah, that goes both ways. Now, one of the things that we wanted to be honest about is that sometimes trust gets broken. And there was a season in our marriage where we were just in a real bad spot. It was probably the darkest season of our marriage, and I've talked about it before publicly. And I was in just a really bad situation emotionally, spiritually, and it broke trust. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you could kind of tell everyone a little bit how that felt when the trust was shattered.
In a word, broken. I was a mess, and it just took us some time. It took some time to rebuild that muscle of trust again, from 100% openness to our relationship and that. So you giving me access to everything so that way I could trust you again.
Yeah, and I bring that up because I think that there's probably a lot of couples out there. A break in trust is pretty common. And it doesn't have to be a huge break in trust. It could be a little break in trust. It could be something that's feels minor to one partner but bigger to the other. And yet, when trust is broken, then we have to rebuild the trust tank, right? We have to refill it. And so we wanted to share a little bit about some of the ways that we have refilled and continue to refill. This is just like the disciplines, right? It's a constant process. And so I thought we'd start by talking about, we have three kind of practices that we use. Mm-hmm. The first one is code words. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about code words and how we use them in our marriage.
So some of the code words, one in particular that I like to use is where I need to get my crazy out.
And what's that mean? What does it mean to get your crazy out?
Where I just share kind of the thoughts that I am having, some of the fantasies.
Yeah, things that feel irrational.
Yeah, things that are definitely not true, but if I don't express them, will eat away at me and cause me to not sleep and, start to doubt my trust in you. One of the other code words we use is sit in the mud puddle, and to just kind of share what we're dealing with that day.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Yeah, I think that one is kind of like hey, I'm trusting you to have empathy about what I'm about to tell you. And so when Karen tells me, hey, I need you to sit in the mud puddle with me, or if I say, hey, I need to sit in the mud puddle with me, then what I'm asking you to listen without actually doing anything. And that's a trust issue.
Yeah, because for a long time, you just wanted to fix things.
Because I'm a fixer.
Yeah. So when I said something was going on with anything, you wanted to automatically do something about it and make me happy.
Yeah, or at the very least, stop the discomfort in the room.
Yeah.
Right. Whether or not you were happy was probably, in hindsight, right? It was probably irrelevant to the fact that I wanted things to be comfortable for me, right? Like, because when we do things like that, it's always more for us than it is the other person. So, those were probably the two big code words that we have used that have kind of stood the test of time. But code words can be good to refill the trust tank because they give you an opportunity to look at a situation with fresh eyes. And so I'm a big fan of code words, especially if you can establish the code words before anybody gets angry or highly charged emotionally.
Yeah.
The second one that we're a really big fan of is getting help. Now, you and I have seen a marriage counselor together. Mm-hmm. We've probably done, a dozen marriage retreats over the years where you and I have been the participants.
Right.
And even more where I've led some. But kind of tell everybody the importance of getting help when trust is broken.
For us, it definitely brought that other person into the room to help us both see the sides and not just our own stuff. It just, it was just kind of what we needed, right? To kind of get through that space, and a person who we could trust with our stuff that wasn't in the middle of it.
Yeah, I would also add to that is that oftentimes when trust is broken, there's a little bit of the blame game. And while the blame game feels vindicating, it's really more of a hindrance than it is a help. And so when we go to ask for help, what we're both essentially doing is surrendering that we're in a place where trust has been broken and we need to rebuild it. Yeah. And so we found some success in Christian counseling. I think both are pretty helpful. I still see a counselor on a regular basis for a lot of things, not just trust. But I would say this, though, is that if you're in an acute situation where the trust is broken and there's a lot of pain, I would tell you to go find a married couple that is healthy and can listen. And if nothing else, that will help. You want someone who's going to point you back to the vows, assuming that everyone is safe and no one is being abused or anything like that in the relationship. If that's the case, then get help immediately. Call 911. But ultimately, if trust has been broken and everyone's still safe, then find some friends who will point you back to Jesus. And that's such an important tool when trust is broken. Because when that trust tank is empty, I think you're really liable. I think I'm really liable to make a horrible decision.
Oh, 100%. And not just, myself included. I know at that time in my life that I had to wait before I could tell certain people because of how they cared about me, and knowing that I wanted to try to figure this out with you and me. And that I think there are those, there can be those people who will badmouth and whatever. And if I had gone down that path, I don't know that we'd be sitting here having this conversation.
Sure. I think the final thing that's really important, so we've talked about code words, we talked about getting help. The final thing that's really important is to take rebuilding trust one day at a time. So that one day at a time mindset is that decision that I don't have to figure it out forever. I don't have to figure it out permanently. I just need to get through today. And my background in the 12-step program has been super helpful in bringing that into our lives. And I think rebuilding trust one day at a time is really the best way to build that solid foundation.
Yeah, for sure. Because I know there was no way that I could look farther ahead than that when we were, even on days that they aren't as bad as what they were, just taking it one day at a time and making sure that we have those connection points and talk with each other.
Yeah. So just to recap with everybody, the three ways to rebuild trust: code words, right? Get intentional about your language before your language gets you in trouble. Then the second thing is get help. Get help from either friends or a certified professional. And then finally, take it one day at a time, right? You don't have to rebuild trust forever. Just rebuild trust today. Friends, I'm so thankful for the opportunity to connect with you. Thankful for all that you do and say, the way that you share this podcast, and for being here. We're going to continue our relationship series next week. What? Karen's coming back. We're going to talk about sex. Now be ready. I don't know that we're ready yet. But we're going to talk about it. We're just going to go after it and have the conversation because we think it's important. So, again, we're super thankful. Do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a review on iTunes. And remember, guys, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.